Welcome to the 41st episode of Dialogika, a podcast between two friends about the latest in politics, society, and feminism in Indonesia and the world. I'm Sweden Lee, and my regular partner in crime, Stephanie Tangkilisan, is out for the count this week with an incredibly sore throat and fever.
Hello, this is currently my voice because I can't really talk right now.
So stay hydrated and rest well, Steph. I've got you covered this week. So with Steph out, we unfortunately don't have a new conversation for you this week, even though there's been a lot of exciting things that have happened recently, such as the Women's March, happening all throughout the country this past weekend here in America. Shout out to everyone who marched, wherever you are, and supported the movement and continued the momentum into 2018. There's a lot of work still to be done, but it's definitely a good start to the year. Speaking of protests, for this week's episode, we're actually going to play for you the most listened to episode of 2017 with over 350 listens and rising. It's our 26th episode, Kartini Kendeng, Indonesia's own water protectors, where we talked about the amazing female farmers of Kendeng in Central Java who have bravely risked their lives and their livelihoods to protest the invasive mining activities of cement companies in their region, which threatens to damage and hurt the community and environment for generations to come. We talked about their incredible feet cement protest, where they encased their feet in cement for days on end in front of the presidential palace in order to get the attention of President Jokowi and his ministers and get them to do something about the issue. So, you'll hear from some of these amazing women during their protest in late March last year. The reason why we're playing this episode again is because we figured for some of our newer listeners, they might not have had the opportunity or chance to listen to this episode yet, and we're really proud of this episode, and we definitely want to support and continue to support the women of Kendeng, the farmers in Kendeng, and their fight against encroaching capitalism in their home. It's a really important issue, and whenever we get the chance to spread awareness about it, we definitely want to do that. And I think for us, echoing what we said in the episode later, we've only got one homeland in Indonesia, and it's one of the most beautiful places. I mean, we're biased, but it is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And if we don't protect it, nobody will. Not the government, not corporations. So I think listening to the story of Busukina and some of the women from Kendeng, it's really inspiring and thought-provoking. And we hope that you listeners, as you listen to this story again, if you've heard it before, or if you're listening to this for the first time, that you'll be inspired and you'll share the story with your friends and family, and hopefully we can do something about this. So, with that in mind, here's to it.
So, brief background on this issue to those who are not that familiar about it yet. I think it is a pretty niche topic for our outside listeners or people who are not in the activism space in Indonesia currently.
I mean, even people in Indonesia, I think, might not know the intricacies of the story. So we want to really make sure to provide the context.
As much as we can, and as with the best information and knowledge that we do know. A lot of these protesters are coming from the Kendeng region, which encompasses villages such as Rembang and Pati. They're mostly farmers who tend to grass fields, rice paddies, in order to feed their livestock. And they're heavily dependent on their natural surroundings, in particular their natural water resources.
And a lot of these farmers have been farming in this land for generations. So this is really the only life they know, right?
And this is the only way they can provide for their family. This struggle started in July 2014 when PT Semen Indonesia, the largest cement company in Indonesia and a state-owned enterprise. So for some of you American listeners who aren't familiar with the concept of state-owned enterprises, so it's basically a company built by the government, right? And so oftentimes they differ based on how much stake the government owns or if they're already, listed in the stock exchange market. So even though they're supposed to be an enterprise, which is to look for profit, they also are usually in spaces like infrastructure, like railroads, electricity, energy, usually sometimes public good type things that are for the greater good of the people that corporations might otherwise, not provide, or provide at a very high price.
I mean, a lot of countries do this, right? Because they know that the government itself cannot always fulfill the needs of the market. They need some sort of enterprise entity to do it. So this is hardly anything new.
Yeah, and it's actually very popular in China. China SOEs are a big part of how China really grew really fast. And usually these kind of companies have a lot of weight in terms of legislative authority. And there's a minister for state-owned enterprises, Rini Sumarno, who's one of the more powerful ministers. So the state-owned enterprise minister is one of the most powerful ministers in the country.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they came in to this area in 2014 to conduct a feasibility study to build new factories and processing plants in the area. And from the beginning, the farmers of Kendeng rejected this idea and started, a legal appeals process in order to stop them from entering the area. Just because the nature of a cement factory, it destroys karst, or these geological formations, to take as a raw material for cement.
And actually, right, if I'm not mistaken, Kendeng is known for its deposits of karst, which is itself very valuable also for the local farmers because that's a water source.
Yeah.
It's a porous type of rock that contains a lot of healthy water, which the farmers need for farming, etc. So it's not just about wanting to stop the cement company from building stuff. They also need this formation. So from 2015 onwards, right, a year after PT Semen Indonesia has come into the scene, a lot of these farmers started doing really active protests, including erecting tents in front of the residence of the Central Javanese governor Ganjar Pranowo, who had given licenses and permits to PT Semen Indonesia.
The farmers of Kendeng also lobbied their case to local courts, which eventually led their case to be heard in the Supreme Court. In April 2016, the group of female farmers, which then the media started calling Kartini Kendeng, walked for 3 days from where they live in Rembang to Jakarta in order to conduct their first ever cement protests. So one thing as well is that they're often called the Kartini of Kendeng. The reason for that is that this area of villages includes Rembang, where the regency from which the husband of Kartini was regent of. Therefore, there's kind of this history about Kartini being from that area, and these protesters are primarily led by women. For Indonesians, being called a Kartini means that you're a national hero, a feminist hero, a person who fights for the empowerment of women. And I don't think they usually reference themselves as Kartini. It's a name that's bestowed to them.
And it's bestowed with a certain sense of admiration, right? Because they are fighting for rights and they are putting their lives and livelihoods on the line for justice and rights.
Yeah.
And this was really big news. These 9 female farmers had their feet encased in cement over the course of 2 days, right across from the presidential palace where President Jokowi lives. And then finally, after 2 days, Jokowi and the government gave a response telling them that, yes, you will have a meeting with the president. And so they had their cement blocks broken apart and they stopped the protest.
Yeah, and after the meeting with the farmers, President Jokowi ordered an environmental study over the impact of cement mining in Kendeng. And he also halted new licenses and permits from being issued.
But the reality is
they
PT
just
Semen
kept
Indonesia
on
kept on doing
So
it.
what actually happened is Ganjar Pranowo was like, okay, these previous things are all cancelled. And then he just issued new ones. That's what he did.
He just ignored precedent, basically. Just you know what? Let's just start from scratch.
No, he's just like, okay, I accept that these things are no longer valid, but I will just issue new ones. That's what he did, which is the moratorium means to stop.
Yeah.
Also in 2016, that their camp that they built and, they protested at was burnt by local law enforcement.
Wow.
And this was a big thing because they've been squatting there for 3 years. And it's just burnt. It's just really crazy to me how heartless people are, to our own people. And I think big part of this is, the contradiction between a government that always says, oh, we want to support, the poor, the farmers of Indonesia, but then turn around and do these kind of things.
Yeah. It's a long history of legal tussle, physical tussle, to get us to this point in March when the second ever cement protest started. We're right now recording on Wednesday, March 22nd.
I know, we procrastinated.
So Wednesday, March 22nd, 9 days after the protest started, which started last week on Monday, March 13th.
So I'm currently in front of Monas, the National Monument of Jakarta. It's also located in front of the Presidential Palace. Here we have over 20 people, 20 farmers from Kendeng, Rembang in Central Java protesting against the injustices they're facing with the forcible land takeover and removal of their land for a cement factory.
So you were actually there on Thursday and Friday, so you got to witness how people actually started the Feed Cement protest. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? How they did it?
Every day they add around 10 people whose feet, will also be encased in cement. And when I was there on Friday and Thursday, they already had about 50 to 60 people whose their feet was in, blocks. So first, each individual's calves and feet are wrapped in gypsum in order to protect their skin from cement, which is like, it stings. Like, it's not a passive thing, because I thought that it would be painless. It's just heavy. No, there's like a good amount of like burning sensation that's going on, because you're just not meant to have your feet encased in like 15 kilograms of cement.
No. Yeah.
So essentially, volunteers mix cement from PT Semen Indonesia, the cement factory brands that
the one that the farmers are opposing.
The farmers are opposing. They mix it in front of the presidential palace, and like they freshly mix it, and then they like put this in the wooden box that creates a kind of like a casing for the feet and the gypsum. Mm-hmm. So they fill it. They kind of like shovel the cement into this casing to submerge the feet.
I think I saw that they had their toes. That's the only thing peeking out.
Yeah, the only thing picking out is like, so the gypsum doesn't cover their toes, and this is on purpose so that the doctors and nurses can test the mobility of the farmers, because otherwise they can't tell whether or not that
the foot's still alive.
Yeah, the foot's still alive. Wow. And there's a lot of swelling that's going on as well.
I'm sure.
So the cement dries overnight, I think. Depends on how much mixture of water there is. Mm-hmm. But each block weighs 15 kilograms or 30 pounds, which means that each individual has 30 to 60 pounds in total on their feet. Like, you cannot lift your feet with that much weight.
That's so dangerous and so committed, right? This act of feet cementing.
I mean, I talked to their nurse about this, and she was telling me how if they're not, being properly monitored, they might, lose feeling in their feet, and if it's not properly attended to, lose their feet.
Yeah.
Like lose mobility in their feet.
Mm-hmm. So it has real physical risks.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have some sad news, which is that in the early hours of yesterday, March 21st,
one of the protesters, Ibu Patmi, who's 48 from the village of Pati, suddenly had a heart attack and unfortunately passed away en route to the hospital, and she's the first casualty of the protest. It's not exactly clear what happened, and whether it's linked to the protest. And so at this point, she was going to go home because she was one of the first protesters who had their feet encased. And she had her feet encased on Thursday, because I was actually there on the day that her feet were being encased.
Oh wow, so you saw it.
Yeah, because I didn't realize this at first, because there were so many of them, I didn't meet all of them. Mm-hmm. But I took photographs of the day, right? And then so I posted an album of that, and then a few of the activists were like, oh, like, this is Ibu Patmi, this is a good photo of her, so they like took the photo and repurposed it. But yeah, like, so I met her and I took like portraits of her as well. So she had her feet encased on Thursday. I just realized this talking about it now. It's so crazy. Mm-hmm. She had one of the more sullen faces, I think, and she didn't really speak very much. And I dug into some photos, and I found a photo of her carrying the Indonesian flag in Pati, protesting from the very beginning, the cement factory.
Wow. So she's been in the struggle
for a long time. And I think just witnessing this in person, I don't know how you felt seeing the photos, mm-hmm. But to me, I don't know, it was definitely one of the most physical and visceral thing I've seen, because just the commitment level it takes to do that. I think it's just, you can tell that these people are putting their lives on the line and their livelihoods on the line. And it's just incredible to me the lengths they have to go to get attention, because I know, and I think everybody knows, if they're not doing something this physical and this intense, that they would not get media attention.
No.
And the turnout there was just... there wasn't that many people. Perhaps it's because like it's during the office hours, right? But in comparison to the Women's March that we had, you know, it's just a completely different feeling. The Women's March was sort of like a celebration and, you know, righteous anger. And there was sort of a happiness there. Like here, it was just like kind of this painful feeling about how sad it is to have the government that you love, the country that you love, ignore you and your plight, right? And I just wish that it had a lot more people showing up for them, because if like 1/10 of the people that showed up for the Women's March were here, we'd be happy, because, you know, like I think it's important to show up for when it's not your personal issue is at stake.
Totally.
Your risk is not at stake. Like, sad to have like people with privilege being heard more. These people are having something like right next week that they need, that will define the rest of their lives and livelihoods, you know.
Jadi Ibu dari desa mana di kabupaten mana?
So at this point, a regular on our podcast, Kate Walton, was actually also at the protest and interviewed one of the leaders of the protest, Ibu Sukina. So the soundbite is in Indonesian, and I'm gonna translate Kate's question.
Dan masih ada keluarga di situ. Ibu bisa ceritakan sedikit tentang kehidupan di situ?
Kate asked Ibu Sukina, can you describe a little bit of life in Kendeng?
My life revolves around farming every day. Sometimes we might sell on the market from Mondays and Thursdays, but that's only until 9 a.m. and the rest of the day we farm and grow grass.
Dan di situ alamnya sekarang
So
masih
is the
indah, masih
environment
alami
there still
atau
natural?
bagaimana?
Is it still beautiful?
In the past, yes,
dulu
it
itu
was so
sangat indah,
beautiful.
sekarang ada
But with
tambang
mining,
sudah agak
it has
berkurang,
become a
apalagi
lot
nanti
less
kalau ada
beautiful.
pabrik semen
And
terus
it will
ditambah
continue to become
tambang-tambang
less
lagi.
beautiful if we have even more factories
Jadi
and more
menurut
mines.
Ibu sendiri,
Do you
kalau
think
pabrik
there is
semen
any
dibangun
positive
di situ,
impact from the
dampaknya
cement
akan seperti
factories?
apa?
Bagi aku
For
sama
myself and other
dulur-dulur sebagai
farmers,
petani nggak
none
ada
whatsoever.
sama
Jadi
What is the
tujuan dari
purpose
protes ini apa
of
saja?
this protest for you guys?
ingin
To
bertemu
meet
Pak
with President
Jokowi
Jokowi
untuk
and ask him to
pabrik
shut down
semen
all
di
factories
yang
and
ada di
mines in
Rembang,
Rembang, and to
menutup
stop all
tambang-tambang,
activities
terutama di
of
Jawa
that
Tengah
kind
ini
in
nggak ada
Central
pabrik
Java.
semen.
Why do you,
Kenapa
Ibu
Ibu
Sukina,
sendiri
want to
mau
participate in
terlibat
this
dalam
protest
protes ini?
yourself?
Ibaratkan ibu
Because
sendiri,
Mother
ibu
Earth
aku
is like my
sendiri
own
yang
mother.
melahirkan.
If humans
Mungkin
give birth
kalau
to humans,
kalau
then the
manusia
earth gives
melahirkan
birth to
manusia,
water,
tapi
to
kalau
plants
bumi
that will
melahirkan
feed the
air,
creatures of
melahirkan
this earth.
tanaman yang bisa dimakan oleh makhluk hidup
Ibu
yang
mau
ada.
How long
berapa
do you
lama
want to
di
stay
sini mau
protest?
pasang kaki?
I don't know how
Aku
long,
belum
as
tahu
long as
sampai
it takes,
berapa
I
lama
guess.
ya sampai berhasil, Mbak.
So actually, you, Kate, talked to Ibu Sukina, but you yourself also talked to Ibu Sukina, right?
Yeah, I was too shy to like actually
Record?
hit record. So I talked to Busukina, and being the first time I met her, I kind of felt awkward. And I had a few people from the Women's March who were also there with me. But one of the things we talked about trying to cheer them on was like, we're like, do you want a manicure?
City folks.
The city folk, and she was like, and they all just laughed at us, and they're like, oh, untuk apa lah, Mbak? Like what for? Like,
Yeah.
they found the idea to be really funny and like kind of ridiculous. And we're just like, we're sorry, we're city folk. Like,
I'm glad they were at least not offended.
and then she was like, oh, nggak apa-apa. Ya, wong kota ya, wong kota ya, wong desa ya. Jadi wong desa. So what she's essentially saying is that like, it's okay for like city folk to remain city folk, and for people in the village to remain like from the village, like as long as city folk are not forced to be village folks and village folks are not forced to be city folks, it's okay. Like there's a balance to be made there. It's not that she's anti-capitalist, but she wants the natural order of things to like not be forced upon them.
Yeah.
I don't know, like to me, like that little analogy kind of like made sense, because she was talking about if you come to Kendeng, or if you come, like you see, even city folk would want to have the beautiful environment of Indonesia to be preserved, because that's such a big part of our identity, and she wants to like also have that for the future of generations, not just for her but for us, like a city folk as well, you know.
Speaking about the community in Kendeng and how this is their overarching philosophy, right? That we have to be responsible to the environment and we can't just throw away what Mother Earth has given us just for the sake of economic progress. I did a little bit of historical research and discovered a very interesting part of Indonesian activist history that we don't really know about, which is the Samin community and movement. It started in the late 1800s by a Javanese farmer from the Kendeng region called Samin Surosentiko. So at this time, Indonesia was still under Dutch colonial rule, and the Dutch government has just taken ownership of all the natural resources that the local farmers depended on. Samin, as one of the farmers, was really unhappy with how the Dutch not only has taken ownership but also started imposing taxes to the locals who have been farming and using this land for hundreds of years.
The Dutch.
Yes.
Never forget.
So, in protest against the Dutch government, Samin started to preach...
This is like the Boston Tea Party movement.
Yeah, like an underground activist movement from the masses, right? Mm-hmm. He started to teach a philosophy of non-violent civic resistance. Mm-hmm. So, not paying taxes.
The OG Gandhi.
Holding protests and demonstrations against the government, really being anti-colonialist and anti-capitalist, because that was what's threatening the environment at this point. The movement became a larger community, and Samin became an almost cult-like figure as the leader. And by the early 1900s, there were rumors that there are now 5,000 members in the Samin community. And of course, the Dutch began to fear Samin's growing influence. So in 1907, they exiled Samin and his followers to the city of Padang in Sumatra, a completely different island with a completely different landscape. And so, basically in 1914, Samin died in exile and he never went back to Central Java. But today, 100 years, almost a century, more than a century after Samin's death, there is still the Samin community who still believes in non-violence resistance for the sake of fighting for the environment. So I think it's important for us to discuss this issue and hear the concerns of the people, right? I mean, these farmers are literally the backbone of our economy. They provide the food and resources that we need in order to grow as a maturing democracy and maturing country. And so if we ignore their needs, and these are real needs and rights, what's the future, right? Like, where's the future of the nation?
I guess to add to what Sweden is saying is that I don't think being for the environment is anti-economic growth, and even one of the primary organizers actually said in his oration that they are not against economic growth. It's just that we need to make sure that it's done in a sustainable fashion in a way that doesn't erase the beauty of the environment for the future generations. And I think we need to, take heed of that message.
I think we as citizens of Indonesia need to protect our environment better and support those who are doing the good fight, right? Because if we lose the environment, then we lose the very nature of our identity as Indonesians, I feel like. We are lucky enough to live in one of the most biodiverse, lush, beautiful landscapes in the world. And we are risking it every day when we don't address these kind of issues.
It's just crazy to me, how much time they have to spend, how much toil they have to suffer for their voices to even be heard by the president who won't even meet them.
So that episode was published in late March of last year. It's been almost a year. What's happened since? I've got a few updates. So in May, a few months after that initial protest in late March, there was actually another feed cement protest, this time happening on the other side of the world, in the city of Heidelberg in Germany. About 40 German citizens protested on behalf of the Kendeng farmers in front of the Heidelberg City Hall, with 5 protesters even going as far as doing the feed cement protest themselves in solidarity with the farmers. So this was done in conjunction to coincide with the general stakeholders meeting of Heidelberg Cement, a huge German cement company who is a majority stakeholder in PT Indo Cement, one of the Indonesian cement companies in question, whose new factory and mining activities are at the core of what the Kendeng farmers are fighting against. There was also a member of the Kendeng organization who's fighting for this present at Heidelberg and participated in the protest as well. There was even a film screening across Germany in cities like Berlin and Cologne of a documentary about the situation in Kendeng and the threats to the environment. So as you can see, there's a real interest to what's happening in Kendeng, and the German citizens definitely feel like they have a say in this, given that Heidelberg Cement is a German company, and they feel like in coming out in solidarity, they might be able to change a few things. Heidelberg Cement has actually come out in late April, before all of this protest in Germany, with a statement saying that the mining activities are not going to affect the water quality in Kendeng, despite reports to the contrary from activists and other NGOs. And they even defended the building of the new PT Indo Cement factory. So this was all happening in Germany in May. Despite all of that, it didn't really get a lot of international coverage nor Indonesian coverage. And Heidelberg Cement definitely did not do anything as a result of those protests. Fast forward a few months after, in September, the female farmers of Kendeng actually came back to Jakarta again and did another protest in front of the presidential palace. This time, instead of the Feed Cement protest, they pitched up a huge blue tent and basically did a sit-in across from the palace. Many of the women were carrying Indonesian flags, and some even made speeches and spoke to the crowds who were there and reporters as well. Bu Sukina, who we heard earlier in the episode, actually came back again and made an impassioned speech asking why hasn't the cement company stopped their destructive activities. At the same time all of this was happening in Jakarta, similar protests were also happening in Rembang, where a lot of these people are from, with farmers and activists continuing to protest the local government, especially the current governor of Central Java, Ganjar Pranowo, and the cement companies. Even with all of the media coverage, even with all of the public protests and outcry, there still wasn't any tangible change from either the government or the cement companies throughout 2017. And now we're in 2018, and the issue doesn't look like it's going to be resolved anytime soon. In fact, there is a gubernatorial election coming up in Central Java that's going to happen in June, and Ganjar himself is going to be up for re-election, so he's definitely not going to be thinking about the Kendeng farmers anytime soon. And it's going to be really difficult to cut through all the political noise and get more attention locally and internationally on what's happening to the Kendeng farmers and their community. Realistically speaking, there's still a long road ahead, but Stephanie and I hope that in telling this story again and spreading awareness about what's happening across our listeners both in Indonesia and abroad, we can continue to keep up the pressure on the Indonesian government, on corporations like Indocement, Heidelberg Cement, Cement Indonesia, and really make sure that the beauty of Indonesia can be experienced by future generations to come. We really hope that we're not going to sacrifice the beauty of our nation, the beauty of our country, and the nature that has given us so many resources and experiences and memories, that we're not just going to give all of that away to corporate capitalism, because then there'll be no more nature to experience, no more nature to savor, and no future to Indonesia. So here's to the women of Kendeng. And please share their stories to your families, friends, and loved ones. We really want to get this issue out to the greater public and continue to build up the support for what's happening on the ground against the cement companies. Anyways, hopefully by the next episode, Stephanie will feel better. And until then, see you guys next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. You can find more information and resources of whatever we talked about on our website, dialogika.id.
Music credits to John Dealey, Lee Roosevelt, and of course, Broke for Free.
If you like what you hear and want to support us, please review our podcast on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. And please share our podcast with your friends. It's the best way to spread the word about Dialogika.
If you want to get more involved, we'd love to hear from you. Our email is dialogikapodcast@gmail.com, or just shoot us a message on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on Instagram, YouTube, SoundCloud, and now Twitter. Please follow us on these various platforms. Our Twitter handle is @dialogikapod. Also, follow me on Twitter. It's Steph Tank. That's STEPHTANGK.
Thank you again, and see you guys next time.
Bye!